Welcome back, everybody. It feels so good to be back on Twitter Spaces. David Goss here, formerly host of Club and Country today, as we get prepared for the greatest feast in global soccer. It is going to be an incredible month of action as we head to the World Cup. I will be alongside Bobby Warshaw every single day. There are games and all of this week previewing the World Cup, as we will be your site to chat, to hang out, to digest what just happened, to preview what's coming up, to talk about all the big stories around the game. Bobby, are you excited? Are you ready?
Am I excited and am I ready for the World Cup, David? Yes. The answer is yes.
It has sort of come out of nowhere. And so in getting ready for the show, it's kind of been a bit of a whiplash experience. But I feel like with games ending this weekend around the world, me walking around New York City asking different restaurants and bars, you guys going to be showing games? And they are like, yeah, 100%. And then they're like, I don't know about the 5 a.m. game. But after that, for sure, I've definitely started to settle in.
And that's because you go to a different bar or restaurant depending on who is playing that game to get the local feel.
It's what I do for qualifying, because it's much easier in qualifying because the calendar, the timing's more spaced, right? From CONMEBOL to Asia, it's hours difference. It's a little tougher for World Cups. I wouldn't say every game. But I talked to some Argentine friends, Brazilian friends, French friends, Moroccan, everything over the course of the weekend.
And for somebody out there listening that wants to do the same,
I'm going to post.
They can't replicate what you have in New York, but generally speaking, what is the one that they should go experience at the local restaurant or bar?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting one. Like, what's the one team to be around?
Yeah.
That's a really tough one to answer. I will say, if you're in California, my advice would be Iran, because the fan base is awesome and fun and it's going to be wild. I think around the US, though, that's probably harder to find. The Netherlands is very famously fun as a fan base. And I will throw Ecuador in there. Ecuador is going to be special and it's going to be a good time. A lot of these are going to be a good time, and it's going to be a special time for a lot of people around the world. And we are excited to be a part of that. So all World Cup through the group stage, through the round of 16 will be on 5 p.m. Eastern time, basically right after the last game of the day, to talk about what we saw and help you get ready for the next day. The show is also, of course, a podcast. So you can find it in our podcast feed. We're going to have guests on with us throughout the World Cup. We've got a big one coming up today in Pa Modou Kah, who played in the Netherlands, played in Qatar, and so has a lot of experience with some of the teams we'll be talking about this first round. Currently head coach around the world, won a Canadian championship with Pacific, coached in the MLS Next Pro playoffs this year with North Texas SC. And of course, you know him from his playing career as a Norwegian international. But Bobby, before we get to him and get to Group A preview, let's talk big picture. Let's start with the full World Cup and let's talk about what we think are the big things. We came up with 5 big topics that we think are going to define this World Cup.
Yeah, if you don't know anything else about coming into this World Cup or coming into the show, I think these are the 5 to keep an eye on. And David, my first one is the last dances. It's true about every major tournament. It's true so often in sports. And I think we have multiple last opportunities for a person or a generation to fulfill the expectations put on them by their country. And the 3 I'm looking at are first, Belgium. They have their golden generation right now who is hitting their mid to late 30s. The most famous name being Kevin De Bruyne. So talented, but yet to win a major trophy. And they are in the 9 teams that can absolutely do it. And then the next 2 we hear about so often, but you can't talk about a major tournament without bringing them up. And it's Ronaldo with the chance to win the World Cup. And then I think, most importantly, of course, Leo Messi. And for me, Messi is undoubtedly the best player I've ever seen in my life. And the fact that that isn't stapled and printed everywhere, that he is definitively the top player, largely comes down, I think, to his lack of a World Cup victory. So if he can do that, it would cement his place for eternity.
Absolutely. And of course, that's what he's chasing on Maradona, which this will be the first Argentine World Cup since he's passed away as well. It seems, from talking to Argentines and sort of reading a lot of their coverage and listening, that's a big storyline, as well as the emotion the team will carry into this World Cup. I think that's going to be fascinating. To me, the biggest storyline is the Winter World Cup, the nature of this tournament. Didier Deschamps talked about it when he came out with his squad a few weeks ago. He said normally in 2014, he had 28 days to prepare for the World Cup. In 2018, he had 24 days. This time he has 6. That is how different this tournament will be. On top of that, you add 4 days between games instead of 5. You add in, of course, what we've seen over the last few weeks, which is injuries, where normally you have those 4 to 6 weeks to get players fit. So even if they get injured with their club, you've got time to sort of get them back in with your team. And of course, you have time to become cohesive, which we will not see potentially for some groups at this World Cup. So the nature of this tournament, it's a one-off. So it's not, is this the precedent for the future? But the way that affects things and what we see, I think when it got announced, talking about it for a while, I thought this might be the best quality of soccer World Cup we'd ever see, because players were not exhausted. It wasn't going to be in ridiculous heat, although it'll be hot. It'll be indoor stadiums, air conditioned. Now, though, I'm starting to question that with the injuries we're seeing and the teams not feeling like they are at a peak that you normally see heading into a World Cup.
Winter World Cup, first time. My next one, David, that I want to bring up is set pieces. So if you look at a standard Major League Soccer season, you will see about 25 to 30% of the goals, depending on how you count them, will come from set pieces. It is drastically different at the international stage and especially the World Cup. In 2018, according to FIFA, over 40% of the goals, somewhere around 42%, came from set pieces. And almost half of the teams at the tournament scored half of their goals from set pieces. So we always talk about it being the beautiful game. We always talk about the World Cup being the pinnacle of that. And yet so much of what we will see and so much of the success will come down to this separate sport, really, of set pieces. So keep an eye on that. Not just how your team is playing, but can they win games on set pieces will be one of the major storylines for the tournament.
There's going to be a few teams Bobby's going to fall in love with because of their set piece routines.
Long throw-ins. Give me all the long throw-ins.
Throw-ins. I've got a little stat for you on short throw-ins for a team as well that we'll get to. My next one is why we all love this. A star will be born. Everyone's going to fall in love with a player. Most likely it's one that a lot of people didn't know before. Maybe it's for one moment. Maybe it's for a thing that happens off the field. But probably it's for performances. I go back to 2014. James Rodriguez, that goal against Uruguay, and just the way the world reacted to him. And you go to 2018, and of course, the storyline is Mbappe. And we knew he was good, but to take over the tournament as a teenager and win, and his, unique celebration and the smile he plays with and the way he plays, everyone fell in love with him. There's going to be multiple stars that people fall in love with. It's not just one, but there's going to be that one that stands out.
And we are going to track that throughout the tournament. Every week we'll have an update on the person that we think has broken out the most, but we also want to hear from the listeners on who their prediction is. So get at us in the comments, get at us in the replies on Twitter, because we want to know what your projections are. But David, I'm going to put you on the spot. Who's the one name that comes to mind that can be that person a month from now that the world knows about?
Is Vinicius allowed?
No.
Hard he's too big already.
Can the guy starting for Real Madrid be the breakout star?
Listen, Mbappe was already a star in 2018. I think they're going to win. I think he's going to be a big reason. So you're not going to let me do that.
I'm absolutely not going to let you pick the Real Madrid starter for the breakout star.
Okay.
I'm embarrassed for you that you even brought that up as your first option.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The problem is I have too many other ones in my head, and it's too hard to manage through them. So who's yours?
I'm really looking at, and we'll talk about this in about 5 minutes when we get to the Netherlands, but Cody Gakpo, the 23-year-old attacker from PSV, as he's already coming out. You have probably heard his name for the first time as you've gone through the previews in the last month. But if Netherlands have a good tournament, he could be a big part of it, and he could be the next person to move to a Barcelona, Real Madrid, Manchester United on the back of the World Cup.
Okay. I think that's a good one. Again, starts for a big team in Europe, but fine. We'll let you do whatever you want to do, Bobby, in this one. Okay. We're on to you now.
Okay. So I think the fifth storyline I have is really the winner's curse. And I'm surprised that this isn't talked about more often. But David, in the last 5 World Cups, 4 of them, the previous winner did not make it out of the group stage. And really more often than not, it was a total disaster for that returning champion. And that speaks largely to the spontaneous, the random nature of a tournament like the World Cup. But it also just shows how there's cycles that come and go. We already talked about the Belgian golden generation, that you really need your players to be at their peak form, at their best, because if the next tournament comes around, it could be too late. So the winner's curse, 4 of the last 5 defending champions have not made it out of their group stage. And what does that mean for France, the defending champions, undoubtedly one of the favorites coming into this tournament, and also one of the countries with the highest probability of a crazy mutiny happening that can tank their tournament?
And the breadcrumbs have already been dropped for the France mutiny ridiculousness. We will get into France as we get through this World Cup previews. As I said, we're going to do every group. We're going to do a breakdown on each team, and then we're going to sort of discuss the groups as we go along. Just Group A today, because we wanted to do this general preview, and we'll do the final group on Friday along with our full predictions. And then throughout the week, we're going to do 2 groups per day. But France, Mbappe already fighting with the French Football Federation on image rights. We know Benzema's history with the team, some big time injuries. Obviously, Pogba and Conte not there. So, 2010 did happen for France, as did 2002. It is kind of every other with France over the last few years. They've gotten back-to-back good ones in 14 and 18, so they might be due on that side. You mentioned statistically they could be favorites. Probably give us the breakdown right now going into it of where the odds stand and sort of who the favorites are.
Yeah, I do think it is important to just look at who are the clear contenders to win this World Cup, because the national teams can change every 4 years who qualifies, who doesn't. So, David, I want to break down the 9 teams that both the betting markets and just basic instincts say are the clear opportunities to win this tournament. And I think you can break it into 4 buckets. The first bucket is the clear favorite, and that has a single team, and that team is Brazil. They have, according to MGM, about a 20% chance of winning this tournament. The gap from them to everyone else is about as large as you will ever see for a World Cup. So they're not only a favorite, but potentially a favorite at a historic rate. The next bucket, which I think are 2 teams that could win and they wouldn't raise an eyebrow at all. It'd feel perfectly natural. And those 2 teams are Argentina and France. Argentina is slightly ahead of France in this. They're about a 17% to France's 14%. Argentina, of course, led by Messi, Lautaro Martinez, Angel Di Maria, and the France team we just talked about. The third group, the third tier, are teams that nobody would be shocked if they win, but there would be a lot of articles written about how they did it, how they punched above their weight. And those 3 teams are Spain, England, and Germany. They all have about a 10% chance. They all have squads that can clearly do it, but they're not as good as the top 3. And then the final bucket, really the 7th, 8th, and 9th favored teams in this tournament, are Netherlands, Belgium, and Portugal. Again, certainly have the rosters, certainly have the coaching pedigrees, the history, but you can't put them as high as the 6 teams ahead of them. So, David, I would think that those are the 9 favorites coming into this World Cup, with the 4 tiers on where they sit heading in.
It's going to be a fun one. It is unique. A lot of times we see European teams win in Europe, South American teams win in South America. This is in neither of those places. So you have that unique element as well, a lack of quote unquote home field for those teams. And as you said, there's a lot of teams that we think wouldn't be shocked if we won it. It's been messaged to me, by the way, that I didn't give a young player. I realize that now. So I'm going to say Easy Adbi. He plays for Morocco. He's been playing in Spain. He's on loan from Barcelona to Osasuna. And there was just a big injury, Amin Harit, for Morocco, who could be we thought would be their starting 10, knocked out. And I think Morocco has a shot to shock some people because they're in a group with some of those could win favorites, as you talked about. And I think it's going to be one of the most fun groups in this World Cup. So let's get into our previews. And to do so, we've got a guest with us. I mentioned it off the top. Pa Moduka. You know him very well. Norwegian international in his day played in the US, Canada, Qatar, in the Netherlands, in Norway as well. And now as a coach, won, I said, a Canadian title in the CPL with Pacific and just made the playoffs in the first year with North Texas SC and MLS Next Pro. Pa, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Pleasure to be here. How are you doing?
We are great. We've already gone through some of the big picture stuff for the previews. It's the World Cup. Are you ready?
Man, I'm excited. I'm excited. Looking forward to it. It's a different World Cup, and to what Bobby was mentioning, it's a different World Cup in a different place. So I'm looking forward to see which teams will be heading home with the trophy.
Let's dig into our groups. We are going to start with Group A. You've got the hosts, Qatar. You've got UEFA qualifiers in Netherlands. You've got the AFCON reigning champions in Senegal. And then you've got the South American World Cup returners for the first time since 2014 in Ecuador.
And David, to give the probabilities to contextualize who these teams are and who the favorite is, right now, Netherlands is the clear group favorite. They have an over 90% chance of going through. But after that, it's about as open a group as we will see. The next two teams, Senegal and Ecuador, have about a 50% projection of going through according to the MGM and betting markets. And then below them at about 20% is Qatar. But as we'll talk about, the host nation has made it through in every single one, bar one, World Cup throughout the past. So even though Qatar is only at 20%, the host nation will always get a bump as the tournament time comes around.
All right, let me dig in here. Let me rattle off some info for everyone out there who hasn't been paying attention, and then we can dig into this team and chat about it a little bit. And let's start with those hosts, Qatar. They obviously didn't have to qualify. They will be the first World Cup host to make their debut in that World Cup ever. So every other World Cup host had already appeared in a World Cup. 2018 World Cup qualifying, they finished bottom of Asian World Cup qualifying. They did play as a guest in UEFA qualifying in Group A. If their results that they had against whichever team was off on a bye had held, they would have been fifth behind Serbia, Portugal, Ireland, and Luxembourg, just ahead of Azerbaijan at 2, 5, and 3. But you have seen this team. You've literally seen this team everywhere over the last few years. They won the 2019 Asian Cup. They played in the group stage of the 2019 Copa America, and then they made it to the semifinals of the 2021 Gold Cup. So this is a team with a ton of international experience over the last few years. Bobby, throughout the week, we're going to give some fun facts. Let me give one here, and then we could chat about them. Their nickname is the Maroon or the Burgundy, as Pot translated it better for me. You can see it in their flag. You see it on their jersey. The reason for that is that purple and maroon was invented in Qatar. It comes from a dye from snails. It was invented on the Alcor Island in Qatar. The Phoenicians debate this, but we'll leave that for another day. It was their main export for thousands of years. It was the most expensive color in the world, equal to gold during the Roman times. So this team, the big overview, the big conversation, I think, is can a solid club team or an average club team win at the international level? This is a Qatar team, doesn't have world-class players, but everyone plays in their domestic league. They've been off for 6 months, the players in this team, as a camp together. They've been playing for 4 to 8 years, preparing for this moment. And the question is, in a year with COVID and the Winter World Cup and all the curveballs that have been thrown against other teams, with their home support, will they be the most cohesive side? And will that take them above a Netherlands, Senegal, and Ecuador to get out of the group? Paul, what are your early thoughts about Qatar?
My early thoughts are the weather condition will play into their favor because they're used to it. But I mean, given that it's their first time there, a lot of nerves will be coming in, a lot of expectation will be in. And some two players at least have played in Europe, which will help them, which is the striker Almoz Ali and Akram Afif, who has also played in Belgium and in Spain. But overall, I think to what Bobby said, given that they have 20% chance, but you never know. It's a World Cup and a lot of strange things are happening in these groups. But I think they can be slightly dangerous.
You played in Qatar, so tell us a little bit about the country and sort of what is the soccer culture?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's not a country of huge respected and history background of soccer, but they're trying to build a country. They're trying to help people, and a lot of these players that you see also are from foreign backgrounds that have
Mhm.
lived in Qatar and naturalized to play for the national team. My time there was, I enjoyed a lot. I learned a lot about the culture. They're very open, and I think this World Cup for them is more about showcasing the Arab culture and also showcasing and taking out the stigma that is related to the Arab countries. But if you talk about football history, obviously it's not much.
You mentioned the players. They have players born in Bahrain, Egypt, Ghana, Somalia. Yeah, absolutely. And Ali Osmos is born in Sudan, all over the world. A lot of those players, though, came at a really young age. Some came because their parents came to play in Qatar, and then they were born there and raised in the Qatar soccer culture.
And some of them also came through the Aspire Academy because what people don't remember is as soon as 2010, 2011, when they were rewarded the World Cup, they started this Aspire Academy to build those players towards the 2022 World Cup.
Yeah, and Felix Sanchez, their coach, also came through the Aspire Academy. He came from La Masia to run that. He followed the graduates through and won the first continental title, which was a U19 championship in 2014 in Asia for Qatar. And then obviously, as I said, the 2019 championship. You mentioned Ali Osmos. So he scored in all three of the continental competitions they played in. He is the first player in world history to do that, but he's the second to win golden boots in two different continental competitions. Do you guys know who the other is?
That's a good one.
Thiago Motta.
Thiago Motta. No, not at all. You got to think about someone who's played in multiple ones, right? Most countries only play in their own, so teams that have been guests in other continental competitions.
Pelé.
Yeah, that's also a pretty good guess. Do you guys want me to tell you?
Messi.
No.
Messi would have been a good one, but he never played in Gold Cup. Copa America was just in
Copa
the US.
America. He played Copa America.
Okay.
Tell us, man.
It is El Matador, Luis Hernandez of Mexico. He won the Golden Boot in Copa America in 1997, and then he won the Golden Boot in the CONCACAF Gold Cup in 2018. Obviously now living in the US, I think. LA Galaxy legend. So that is your we weren't supposed to do a history fact there, but I had to put that one in because I love it so much. But as we said, Ali Osmos, he's the key up top, playing under Hernan Crespo right now at his club side, although not with the club side very often. And as we said, everything in the attack, it ends with him. The other names that I wanted to throw out there is Saad Al-Sheet, the goalkeeper who has a ton of experience fighting right now for his spot, but will be key as a team that sits a little bit deeper. And then Hassan Al-Hayados, the captain. He's 14 years at the international level. He's the all-time leader in caps, appearances. He takes the PKs. He is the calm in this team. When they sit deep and then go to counter, the ball at his foot is when the team sort of takes their breath.
So just to play that back, David, it's a very well-organized team where everyone plays in Qatar, the home country. They've had 6 months off. And for the most part, it is a defensively organized group with the 3 best players as the 3 attackers, the 2 forwards in a 3-5-2 setup, and then the number 10 behind them is the 3rd player to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and the example for you is in 2019, that Asian Cup win where they won a group with Saudi Arabia in it. They beat Iraq, South Korea, and UAE before beating Japan in the final. 16 goals scored, 1 goal against, and that was in the final once it was already decided. So this is an elite defensive team when they can be, and they do have that ability to, as you said, hit on the counter and be dangerous. Pa gave his expectations. Bobby, for you, what's sort of your thought?
My main takeaway is I think that we're going to watch this Qatar team, and it's also true about other countries in this tournament because we're talking about Qatar first. I think we are going to realize how globalized world football has become, David, because we often talk about the rise of American soccer, which is true in so many ways, but we don't often talk about is how that also affects so many other countries around the world. And the way we talk about training methodologies, the way coaches move between country to country, the way players move country to country, it has really created a rising tide in world football across the globe. And I think that we will see how many good, fun, exciting, skillful players and teams there are in all parts of the globe. And that also just excites me. It excites me when a country can show off what they can do, can show off the players they've produced. And that's one of my first thoughts that comes to mind as we see this Qatar team, because it was one of my main takeaways when they played the U.S. at the Gold Cup a year ago.
And that was a big performance for them, lost, but obviously getting to the semifinals was huge. And as Pa said, a chance to also show off their culture and this country because they are going to be the hosts of this World Cup. Eric Chomskis in the tweets mentioned this sounds similar to what the U.S. did in 90 and 94. It's also similar to what South Korea did in 02. And that worked really well for all of those countries in terms of getting the group together really early and playing as a club team going into it. Let's move on now to the Netherlands. Bobby, you're going to take us through some facts real quick.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the fun fact, as one always should. And David, did you know that the world's top exporter of flowers is the Netherlands, and that roughly 80% of the world's flower bulbs come from the Netherlands, and that those flower bulbs make up about 5% of the Dutch GDP? Did you know all of that?
Would it make you sad if I knew some of that already?
It would make me slightly
Isn't
sad.
it tulips? Is that right? Pa, you know, right? You've been there.
Tulips.
You're saying I need to bring more juice on my fun facts.
I'm just saying me and Pa are really proud of you that you're learning. And that's all that matters.
Thanks,
It's
guys.
education.
Thanks. I
Bob
thought your
been
fun
good.
facts were great. Okay, that's good to know. Now I can set the stage. Okay, they made it to this World Cup because they won their UEFA qualifying group. Second place in that group was Turkey. And David, the main part about following this Dutch national team is how up and down of an experience it is. Because about once a decade, this men's Dutch national team both makes a World Cup semifinal and also completely misses out on the tournament entirely. They are returning to this World Cup after missing the 2018 iteration, and they are led by, for the third time, the famous Louis van Gaal. And David, for me, the main narrative about this team is the fact that it really feels like they have their world football reputation on the line at the 2022 World Cup, because we are of a generation in which Dutch football is really at the top of the pyramid across the world. But I'm not sure that that's going to be true for each subsequent generation, because after they miss out on the 2018 World Cup, they missed out on the 2016 Euros, an early exit from 2020 Euros, and a Dutch league that is not as prominent on the world stage. I'm not sure that the 10-year-olds coming through, the 12-year-olds, the people that are now starting to follow world football will see Netherlands as a top footballing nation in the way that I think really everyone else has who has come through.
Pa, we kind of have this conversation fairly often about the Netherlands. You played there. What do you think of the perception and sort of place that the Netherlands holds in the global game?
Well, I do agree a little bit with Bobby because the last time they lost and they didn't qualify, they happened to go through generational changes, which is happening again. When they missed the 2002 World Cup was the same.
Mhm.
The expectation in Holland is always that we're the best. We always have to make it. But it's also showed, to Bobby's point, that the league. Remembering when I was playing in the league, you had the Mark van Bommels, you have the Van Nistelrooys, you had the Derek Kuyt, you have the Wesley Snyders, you had these type of players playing in the league. Now, all of those players are not playing in Holland anymore. They export them at the early age and they go out. And so the league is not as strong as it was before. And I do believe that, even in this group, it's going to be a tough group for Holland, which I hope that they get through it because the quality players that they possess. But it's going to be tough for them. The first game will show a lot where they stand. And when you see how they play at times, they will play a 4-4-3, 4-3-3. They will play a 3-4-1-2. Depending on what he did in 2014 World Cup, I think he's going back to the system.
Yeah, Louis van Gaal back in charge, trying, Bobby, to sort of rescue things after Frank de Boer.
Yeah. And David, we could talk about so many players on this team, but I actually want to break it down into three specific players. And the first one is actually two, and they are they're household names in Frankie de Jong of Barcelona and Virgil van Dijk of Liverpool. They will make up the spine of this team. They are at the top of the world hierarchy. But below them, I think, are actually the two players that are probably the key variables for this group. And the first is center forward Memphis Depay, currently at Barcelona. Not someone that would come to mind as a person that you really need to have a premier World Cup performance for your team to make it through, but he is particularly important to this Dutch team. And David, throughout UEFA qualifying, he actually was one of the joint top scorers along with England's Harry Kane. He is going to miss the first game. He'll be replaced by Vincent Janssen, formerly of Monterrey and Liga MX, but he is so important to what this team does. And the second one, I've already mentioned him in the potential breakout stars, is Cody Gakpo, 23-year-old attacker for PSV. Paul mentioned this team will probably play with a attacker just under the strikers, which is really the best position in soccer. But that will probably be Cody Gakpo, and he has a chance to put himself on the map and make a club to an even, or make a move to an even bigger club after the tournament.
It's going to be fascinating with this team. Pa, you mentioned the system a little bit for them, maybe more defensive than the Dutch have been known for, but they're also still more expansive than the average international team, right? Like they're going to possess and spread the field.
Well, they will try, but it will be more vertical. They're not going to out-possess as much as they want to do, because they will try to hit also team on the counter with their wing backs, Dumfries coming on one side, maybe Malacia. So for me, the weakness will be they will be missing Wijnaldum, who's also a big miss for them, because in the system that Van Gaal plays, he's been a huge factor in there. But they will replace him with Kopenmeyers, who's playing in Atlanta. But again, it is not a team with a huge World Cup experience either.
Yeah.
They don't have that much experience. It is a very young Dutch team, and that will play a factor in as well.
It does feel like this could be similar to, we talked about 2010, where all of a sudden those young players became stars and went on from there. It's going to be, I think this is one of the teams that's fascinating. Obviously, their fan support is second to none. So that's they're always fun to watch, right? You're guaranteed to get something even at Euros. You get the De Ligt red card that causes a chaotic game against Czech that they go out on. So it's always really fun. We're going to move to Africa. Let's go to Senegal here. Qualifying 6-1-1 in World Cup qualifying, 16 goals for, 5 goals against. They beat Egypt in the playoffs in PKs after tying in both legs. And so they won their group. And then the Egyptian series was the playoffs to get here. Last time you saw this team, they were winning the African Nations Cup this February against that same Egypt in PKs as well for the first time in their nation's history. They knocked off Burkina Faso, Equatorial Guinea, Cape Verde to get there and win it. And this is a huge historic moment. Pa, give us sort of a little bit here. You're originally from the Gambia, a neighbor of Senegal. Give us a little bit of context of how big that tournament meant and that title meant.
Huge. I mean, huge, given the players that they possess, but also being one of the nations that has been progressing well in football in Africa. I think was timely overdue for them to win it. They've been close a couple of times, but I mean, for the footballing country, it meant a lot, and and them qualifying to World Cup as well means huge for the country, because but mainly most of their players, actually, crazy as it is, they're either born in France or played their career in France. There's hardly many of these players that are actually playing in Senegal or have played in Senegal. So that also makes it even better. And given the type of players that they have, they're going to play a system 4-3-3. Right? They will be in mid-block defending, and then they will be great in transition. Because with Sadio Mane, with Ismaila Sarr up front, they're going to be a handful. And they have a very solid defense in goalkeeper Mendy, Koulibaly. So they're going to be a tough team to beat, and they're one of my favorites, to be fair.
Pa, the names that you just mentioned are veteran names. It is one of the most experienced veteran names in the tournament. We often hear that at the international stage, veterans matter.
Yes.
Is that true? Is that something that we should actually take into effect, especially if you're a U.S. men's national team fan, where the opposite is at stake here? So how much does experience or age matter in a tournament like this?
Well, it do matters, because calming down the nerves, making the younger guys be more composed and understanding them what is happening in the game. And I think them winning the African Nations Cup helps them a little bit. Will be a massive lift for them. And playing with players like Idrissa Gueye, who played for PSG, Kouyaté as well, who's been around, Koulibaly. These players are players that are also been playing big games. Sadio Mane for the past 5 years have been playing huge games for Liverpool. So that's going to come into effect. And if you look at Senegal and you look at the Dutch, or you look at Ecuador, or you look at Qatar, Senegal is the most experienced team in this group.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there's a little worry on some of that experience. Mane obviously going out injured for Bayern
Oh, he'll
Munich.
be ready.
They put him on the roster. There was no questions about it. It feels like a whole continent is praying for him to be healthy.
Oh yeah,
but he is a massive factor because he scores almost all of their goals, as we saw at AFCON. Bouna Sarr, who's been a starter off and on for Bayern Munich, he's out of the tournament with an injury. Salio Cis as well, who started at left back in the AFCON final, he's out of the tournament as well. But you mentioned all those names: Mane, Koulibaly, who I think is the best center back in the world, Edouard Mendy, Nampali's Mendy, Kouate, all these pieces. There's a ton of experience in this team. And one of the things that stands out to me about this team is it all comes under Aliou Cisse, the head coach for this team, Senegalese captain. He led the team in 2002 to the AFCON final, which was the first in the nation's history. And then he leads the team as coach in 2022 to win their first one. And he is a trend. All 5 African teams at this World Cup have domestic coaches for their team, which is not something that we've seen in the past.
No, in the past, it has been either European coaches or South American coaches to come in. And I think the trend is now trending towards, okay, can we now bring our own coaches? Can we guide our own coaches to help the national team? And I think also having ex-players coming in and trying to help and trying to develop the game in Africa, I think is massive and I think it's huge. So having him, who played World Cup as well, for this team, guide them as a captain as well. I think he commands a lot of leadership, but also the players respect him, which is also very important. Everything he says, he followed through, and I think that has been one of the biggest problems in Africa, footballing wise, is that the structure has never been there, and we see now that the structure is coming through. And I mean, he's a massive leader for this team, and I think also the people that follows him are gonna see that. And this team is the team to watch. I'm telling you, it's the team to watch.
I think I agree with you. And we talked about who could be emerging stars from this tournament. If Cisse wasn't from the last one, if Senegal does some of what it sounds like all think they can do, I would be surprised if this guy's not a coach who's coaching one of the big European teams from a club side very soon, because his team, as you said, they're structured. They play for him. They are willing to suffer for him, which is one of those things you see from elite coaches, right? This is a team that has sat in some really big games and not extended themselves, played through those moments, and then been able to get over it. And he has protected those players and made them want to come and be a part of this group, which has not been true over the last few years. I have a fact here, by the way, Pa, on this one, which I forgot you were going to be on, so I made this up, and now I'm going to butcher it, and you're going to expose me, and I'm okay with that. So here's my fact, by the way. The most widely spoken language in Senegal is Wolof, which is a native language to the region, including the Gambia and Mauritania, where Pa was born in the Gambia. It was founded and then spread in the Wolof Jollof Kingdom between 1350 and the 1600s over the area. And the word banana comes from the Wolof language and was adopted by people around the world. And now it's the word we use. Does that sound in any way accurate, Pa?
To be honest with you, you really done your research. I'm really impressed.
Yes,
that is a good one, Bobby. The man has done his research, Bobby.
I know he's always so good.
The man has done his research, Bobby. Wow! I didn't know. Wow, well done, Dave.
Okay, there we go. I didn't butcher anything. I didn't get made fun of by someone who's fluent in Wolof.
No, okay. Wolof is the language that you have. Wolof, which is the main language spoken in Gambia and in Senegal, and then followed by Mandinka.
Oof. Okay, that feels really good. Bobby, we spoke about this team a bunch. We talked about the Netherlands, their style. Senegal's is obviously different, as we said. Defend a little bit deeper, as Pa said, mid-block and counter. What do you see for this team in this group and sort of for this World Cup?
One of the most organized teams, as we talked about, one of the smartest, most experienced teams. That always has extra value for this tournament. But David, as we talked about, I still think that they'll struggle with the energy of Ecuador. So, I didn't want to give projections yet. I want to say projections until Friday. But one of the teams that, as we'll talk about in a minute, because of their organization, because of the ability to get more than the sum of the parts, will be one of the more fun teams to watch.
Okay. Pa, any final thoughts before we move to the next team?
No, I agree with Bobby. The next team is a team also to watch.
All right, let's hit Ecuador then, Bobby. Give us some facts before we dig into it.
Well, David, you asked me that question as my mind was already starting to salivate over my fun fact about Ecuador.
I was just imagine I got distracted by the flavors in my mouth, because if you watch the World Cup, and I know that there are many people in this bucket, mostly to think about new dishes to make, to expand your horizons on the foods that you can eat at home. I think Ecuador is a place to have at the top of that list, because they have a soup, the locro de papa, which is a potato and cheese soup that is amazing. It's simple to make. It has great texture. It has great flavors. And if you're at your computer, Google it right now. Make it during one of the Ecuador games, locro de papa. It should be the soup of the tournament, if nothing else.
All right. I love that.
So they qualified for this World Cup by finishing 4th in South American qualifying, behind Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, but ahead of Colombia, Chile, and Peru. And David, do we want to give one sentence on the scandal that almost kicked them out of the tournament?
Yeah, we can do that. Do you want me to do it?
I'll just say quickly that they had a player who Chile said was actually born in Colombia, and that because that player who played in qualifying was born in Colombia, they should lose points and be disqualified. You've probably heard about this over the last 6 months. It was just only finally settled last week. FIFA said that they do not have enough evidence. They actually did not say it didn't happen, only that they did not have enough evidence to keep Ecuador from playing in the tournament. So after all of it, Ecuador is in, and they will be in this Group B.
And just to mention, you can be born in another country, naturalized, whatever. The debate here is that the paperwork used to get him a passport for Ecuador was not real. And that was the debate around it. His name's Byron Castillo. He's expected to start still at right back for this team. So he's an influential part of this group. But Bobby, continue on with Ecuador.
Okay. So David, when we think about South America, we have the hierarchy in our heads, right? Of course, Brazil and Argentina at the top. I, until doing the research, had not been giving Ecuador enough respect for where they stand in this hierarchy, because they have made 4 of the last 6 World Cups, more than Colombia, more than Chile. And we are also starting to see that if the betting market is the most efficient way to think about probabilities for a tournament, I think the transfer market is a pretty efficient way to think about a country's hierarchy on the world stage. And if every decade there is a new country that is the in vogue place to go find talented stars, and I think really maybe the last one in South America 7 or 8 years ago was Colombia, the country that that clubs across the world are talking about as the place to go find talent is Ecuador. They are maybe one of the most exciting, young, on the rise countries that we see, and really not even on the rise, a country that's already been there, and now people are just starting to take notice of it.
I agree with you. That's what's really interesting. I think all of us, obviously working here in North America, we know how often people are going to Ecuador to find players now, sort of skipping over Colombia and Argentina, where it used to be you'd pull Ecuador players who had already gone to those leagues. Now people are going straight there. I know you've coached players from there as well as from Colombia as well, and know there's a lot of quality there, and now it's starting to get exposed to the world.
Absolutely, I think it's a hidden gem when it comes to talent, and we've seen it in MLS this years and this past years coming in. To Bobby's point, in MLS, when people were looking, you always go to the big countries, the Uruguays, the Argentinas. Now that you're seeing like the game has become so much global, and everything is now on top of our fingertips. And now for us to go and see players from different countries, it's easy. And Ecuador, for me, is a team that is very exciting to watch and very fun, very young, very dynamic team. And I'm looking forward to see what they can do, especially Cifuentes.
I'm glad you brought up how dynamic they are, because they will be one of the 2 youngest teams at this World Cup. And I think that really pops when you watch them play, that their youthfulness, their exuberance comes out, because a lot of teams might try and find a competitive advantage from their tactics or from their individual stars. But the way Ecuador is visually appealing is because they're just so energetic. They are tactical. They do have players that can really stand out. But as a group, they're flying all over. They're competing. They're tackling.
Very aggressive team. And like you said, they play a 4-3-3. but as well as when they're attacking, they're attacking with 4 or 5 players. They're basically building up, but in their build up, they build up more like a 4-2-4, where they allow the players just to bomb forward and go forward. And I mean that's why in this group, I don't see a clear favorite besides maybe Senegal.
Mm.
And I think,
you think Senegal is the favorite?
I think for me in this group, Senegal is the favorite, and then secondly, I know my Dutch people will not be happy me saying this, but I fear Ecuador because of the quality of the players that they possess, and many of these players are actually playing in Europe, and also some of them are playing here in the US. They're playing at high level. If you see Cifuentes, if you see Moises Caicedo, Estupiñán, and also the center back that is playing for Bayer Leverkusen, Hincapi, a great left-footed center back who can distribute from the back.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy to face them because they're a hungry young squad who want to prove themselves.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be easy. It's really going to be tough.
Yeah, Pa, I want to pull out and really highlight at least 2 of the players you just mentioned. Because again, if you like to watch the World Cup because of the young breakout stars, they have 2 players that have probably already broken out 90% of the way, but could take their career to the next level. And the first is Moises Caicedo, 20-year-old center midfielder for Brighton. He's already one of the bright young stars in the English Premier League. Came through from Independiente del Valle in Ecuador. And then the second is Piero Hincapi from Leverkusen, a 20-year-old center back, a star in the German Bundesliga already. And then just because he's a personal favorite of mine, I will also throw out Enner Valencia, 32-year-old attacker for Fenerbahce, who absolutely does not belong in this group. I just personally really like Enner Valencia.
Well, I mean, for him with his experience, I think it's going to be huge because he's the captain of the team, and I think he will play a massive role. But you're forgetting one too also as well, Cifuentes. I think Cifuentes is mildly underrated, and I think in this World Cup he's going to showcase himself.
Right,
the LAFC very good player. Yeah,
the LAFC
very,
center
very
midfielder.
Yeah, the LAFC. I think he's going to have a breakout World Cup.
I think LAFC is betting on that as well because the expectation is to sell him off the back of this. It's going to be exciting. Gustavo Alfaro, the coach. Bobby, you mentioned with Moises Caicedo, Independiente del Valle, that is a new club. They've changed the way they operate. When you look at Ecuador, are they like sort of the reason that all of this has shifted and turned around, or is it bigger than them?
Yeah, you always need, and it's not a perfect term, but I think the concept is right. You always need a greater fool to set a standard. You need someone who goes against the trend, who zigs when everyone else zags. And that's what Independiente did in Ecuador. And they have not been made the fool because they've now made, I believe it's 2 Copa Sudamericana finals in the last 5 years, a Copa Libertadores late round run. So they have become one of the premier teams in South America. But when they first made this priority to play young players, it was seen as a foolish concept. And yet they have set the standard. And now over the last decade, other teams in Ecuador have done the same. They see that you can win with young players, that you can move them on and generate revenue to grow your club as a whole. So Independiente might not be someone that American fans have heard of, but they are one of the leading forces in world football for the way they've run their club.
They're also the home club of about half this roster, which is where you start to look at, and you look at an Ajax or a Barca, if you're right, but you look at clubs that produce players at a high level. San Lorenzo's one in Argentina. They've had multiple World Cups where they've had the most graduates of any team in the world. And that's for an Argentina national team that has as much talent as anyone does. You see clubs like that sort of can build up a national team. And it feels like, as you mentioned, Ecuador is next and they're going to be special. But I think I agree with you about the breakdown of this group. I question Sadio Mane's health a little more than you do, and that's a fear for me.
Paul, I know. Wait, how are we? You said it so confidently that you're putting Senegal ahead of Netherlands. So what about the way they match up? Because really, we can talk about who's a better team, but it's 3 games, so a lot of it is just how teams match up. Why are you so confident that Senegal is better than Netherlands?
Well, I mean, for me, the reason why I say that is looking at the Dutch team is to your point. You mentioned two players that is going to be the key factor for the Dutch team: Van Dijk and Frankie De Jong. Memphis haven't played a lot, so we don't know how he's going to fare. So Dumfries is playing for Inter, that is well, but the Dutch team doesn't possess that quality that they used to.
I won't stand for this blasphemy about Daily Blind. I won't stand for it. I'll die on the Daily Blind hill.
I mean, Daly is a player that I truly like because he showcased that he can play at this level. He did it in 2014 as well. But times are changing. He's getting older. And I think Senegal is also more dynamic. Ecuador is more dynamic than the Dutch team. Mm-hmm. The Dutch team, they have a veteran head coach who's been there. So that is something that will help. But if you look at the squad and the players itself, I don't really see the Dutch team that you look at them and you go, okay, this is a team that's going to make it far.
Yeah. So there's a dynamic here that I'm going to use as a transition to our last segment, which is what are the pieces that we're most energized about overall in the World Cup? And we've generally tried to keep it high level, but now I want to go down to a little bit of a nerdier sphere. And I'll start by saying that the part that I'm most excited to see is, will we see a new paradigm written in international football where for the last 5 years, because France won in 2018 based on simplicity and superior talent, the U.S. women's national team won in 2019 based on simple tactics and superior talent. And the conversation since then has been that international football is based on simplicity and talent and just letting players go out and getting the most of the unit that you have.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's always, and I think we're going to see teams, to finish this off, in the Netherlands, in Spain, in Belgium, and of course in the US, who will try to get more than the sum of their parts through their tactics. And that is part of what we're seeing in Netherlands versus Senegal. Senegal is very simple. They will try and allow they're very organized and very smart, but it is effectively a simple structure compared to the Netherlands, which is more complicated in how they will try and rotate and play.
No, I mean, if you look at the last World Cups, to your point, right, everything has been won by simplicity and talent. If you look at, let's say, every team, the average spacing is 26 meters. That's around, 30 yards or something like that. That is the spacing. And then it's your individual quality that's going to decide games, especially at the high level. It's going to come down to the individual qualities of your players that you possess. A little bit of magic, and then they will change the dynamics of games. At the World Cup stage, and even US has players that can do it.
So you're saying that you would bet on the side of simplicity and talent over more nuanced tactics that we will see from the US and Spain and Belgium?
Well, I mean, the US going to surprise a lot of players and a lot of teams. A lot of people going to be surprised of where the US is with their team. Because if you look at US right in this World Cup and you look at US back in 2014 World Cup, you have players playing big teams. Half of the US rosters also have played in big teams, which is going to factor in, which is going to help. But going into World Cup, I mean, the individual players with their quality will decide the game. And some players that we don't even talk about, don't even know, going to have breakout. And we go, wow, where did that come from?
And that's, by the way, for me, one of the big factors of this tournament is the 5 subs for each team. And what Pa just said of the breakout players, who's your game changers off the bench? How do you, coaches, I think, have more influence to change the flow of games, because if they're against it in the first half, I think coaches are going to make first half subs because they'll have halftime as a break, especially in the knockout rounds where you then have another break going into, potentially extra time and whatnot. I think coaches will make early subs, and I think they'll have those pre-planned subs in. That's not just, let me look at the game in the 65th minute. But Bobby, I think this is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, David, I think I love that point, because one of the illogical inefficiencies of soccer is that there aren't more first half subs. It should, from every logical perspective, from every chess concept, it should absolutely happen. The problem is, and Paul could certainly speak to this, is that if you sub a player in the 20th minute, you might lose them for the season. I'm not sure that's as big of an issue at the World Cup when it's all hands on deck, all mental focus to winning for your country, and that a player can bounce back 4 days later. So I'm with you. I'm very excited to see the creative ways that coaches use subs, knowing that keeping a player engaged is not as hard within a World Cup tournament.
No, it's huge. I think the new rules with the 5 subs have helped a lot of coaches, including myself, because to your point that you can make subs, you can have people coming off the bench at different times in the game to help the team. And I think before, when you only had the 3 subs, you had to truly calculate it at which time you're going to make your subs and when. And you're going to see, to that point that what Bobby said, that maybe a team will take a sub in first half, but also a team might take a sub in the 50th, 65th, 75th minute, when between the 60 and the 75th minute, when normally you make the most subs, as well as when you're winning a game. Okay, can we wait until to the 85th, 86th minute, to make a sub? So all those kind of factors in.
And then maybe somebody makes a sub for a long throw specialist and they really hit the club and country bingo.
Oh, I didn't mention this. I read a long breakdown, not obviously one that I did myself, that Qatar has a specific throw-in play where they throw short and it's straight to a switch field ball. So the entire team, except one player, comes over to the side of the throw-in. They throw it back towards their own goal to the whatever attacking player, and that attacking player hits it first time off the throw across the field. Bobby, it's going to be your favorite part of the tournament. And it's coming up on Sunday, the first game of the tournament, 11 a.m. Eastern time. So we will be with you 1:30 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday to react to that game. Then we will be on every single day. There are games, 5 p.m. Eastern time live. And you can download the show, Club and Country Today. It'll be in our MLS Today podcast feed. So search MLS Today on Spotify or any of your podcast apps to get the show. That will be 5 p.m. Eastern time every single day from the group stage through the round of 16 until the game times adjust, and then we'll adjust with it. And we'll be back here all week, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And this show, of course, will be on podcast form tomorrow. Obviously, Group B and Group C that we have to preview all the way through to Friday when we'll give our overall predictions and picks. We'll have guests on with us over the course of the tournament, but none will be better. And obviously, he will be back than Pa Moduka. Pa, you're a legend. I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for joining us, bringing some of your experience and knowledge.
Thank you for having me. Bobby, pleasure talking to you as well.
Always fun, Pa. Thanks for coming.
Bobby's less fun to talk to than me, so that's why Pa had to point it out specifically and make him feel better. Pa's a legend. Bobby, you as well. Looking forward to doing more of these shows, and thank you to all of you out there for listening. I know everyone's getting excited like us, so this is going to be your spot. Everything you need to know about these teams going in, these groups, and then, of course, we will give you reactions to the games we watch and previews of the next day games as the tournament comes along.